Hello everyone and welcome to the webinar. Today's topic, ClearPath OS 2200 Software Series, Release 2.0 Client Webinar. Let's get started. Our first presenter for you today is Chuck Lefebvre, is Senior Director of ClearPath Forward Product Management. And with that, Chuck, the audience is yours.
Thank you very much, Matt. And thank you and welcome to all of our clients and partners who are attending this session today. We appreciate your attendance to get this update from us on our latest product introduction. My role this morning is just to set the stage a bit with and put into context of what Bob will be talking about on the product details and the new product we're introducing. I'm going to, excuse me, give a little introduction on our strategic direction and then turn it over to Bob. So our ClearPath product, as those of you who have been involved in our program for many, many years know that our ClearPath product is focused in the high volume transaction processing arena with rock solid security, predictable workload performance with unpredictable workloads coming at us and supporting a continuation of the skills necessary to support those systems, as shown in the left box on this chart. In the right box, some of our attention at a higher priority in recent years dealing with the challenges of, for example, digital transformation as clients are bringing in new digital applications to integrate with our systems of record, our client systems running on ClearPath, typically known as systems of record. We continue in our strategy, we continue to evolve our technology in light of those challenges shown at the top part of this slide to deal with these most demanding workloads and the change that is occurring. The session today is really one focusing on new choice that you, our clients, have on where you deploy those ClearPath OS 2200 applications. The second bullet there. We're giving you new places and new ways to deploy that OS 2200 environment, a real key element of our strategy. We continue to evolve the software to provide a rich set of product and services for application modernization to deal with that digital transformation, to keep those systems of record relevant and not leave them isolated in the data center, to keep them relevant for integrating with those digital applications that you are developing or perhaps buying. We're not talking about much of that today. Our session today is focused on our infrastructure and the Dorado system and how we've evolved where that can execute. All of that is complemented by our services team offering complete managed services or more pointed staff augmentation to complement your teams in running these systems. So as we know with the Dorado systems on the top half of this chart, historically we built everything, the technology, the hardware technology, and the software technology. In the early 2000s we began developing, transitioning the product to run on Intel-based systems. In 2015 we achieved a crossover point where the performance of our Intel-based systems met or exceeded that provided on our proprietary CMOS technology. We've continued to leverage that Intel technology going forward in the last couple of years and have delivered continued performance improvement on the high end, going beyond what we could do with CMOS systems. In recent years, we've begun a new effort to leverage that virtualization and leverage our firmware that runs on Intel, transposing the instruction set to be able to run on Intel-based systems. And now today, we're introducing the general purpose use of OS 2200 systems running on hardware that you select and on an open virtualization layer. As we go into the future, we're going to take that even farther to run on public clouds, continuing the evolution of our, what we call our software series, to run on other relevant emerging technologies. We're doing this in a way that maintains the unmatched security, scalability, while also allowing the automation and integration. In future sessions, you'll hear more about things we're doing, for example, to add Python to our platforms as a environment to do the implementation of applications. All of this complemented here as shown with a ring of three family of product services. The traditional ones in the lower left for product implementation, a full managed service where we look after your system entirely, or just application enrichment services. Before I transition to Bob, one of the last things we always ensure we keep visible to our teams who are doing the implementation is a focus on security, and we're proud that we stay at the top of this list. The data that's compiled in this list comes from a publicly accessible NIST database, a National Vulnerability Database. The raw data is in that database. We extract the data every couple of months, correlate it as we've done here, and publish it. As we said, we're proud that our OS 2200 system remains at the top of this list. Now I'm going to turn this over to Bob LaFleur for Bob to take you through the details of our new product introduction today. Bob?
Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate you doing that for us, giving us that intro, as well as taking the time for everybody to join us here today. We have a lot of good information, so I'm going to grab control here and move right along. Let's talk a little about the software series strategy. We recognize that data centers have been changing and that the ClearPath products must keep pace. We see that there's a great many of our clients that want the choice of a server architecture, or to be able to change that as the technologies grow and their needs grow. They have a standard within the data centers that they want to maximize, and add flexibility for their ClearPath environments to use the same tools and skill sets that they have for other servers. And as Chuck said, this really then becomes the basis for future releases that we will have for OS 2200 on additional hypervisors and a public cloud infrastructure. So if we look at what we really gained through the software series strategy, it's a great deal of flexibility. Again, allowing clients to standardize on your choice of an Intel platform. Align your ClearPath processing, what is standard within the data center, to maximize those resources, to gain the common skills and tools that are utilized within the your standard data center design. And with VMware, we've even taken that additionally to some new levels where, again, VMware can provide additional capabilities, new techniques, all within a smaller footprint with less power and cooling requirements. But as important as the changes are that we're introducing with the software series design, we need to look and make sure that we recognize what shouldn't change and what doesn't change with this new release that we'll be talking about today. The capabilities that we'll have within software series are fully in line with the OS 2200 processing environment. All the traditional transaction processing and data integration tools and interfaces that you rely on are maintained within the OS 2200 software series. We certainly, with any architecture change, recognize that we have to maintain code compatibility. And we have developed specialized firmware to do that and have taken the extra step of hardening it such that there's added security within the pieces of Linux that we utilize in our firmware. We also want to maintain the flexible buying models, the software licensing that you have with the Dorado family, a pay-for-use model very similar to metering that is based on a measured usage of a software series instance, as well as a fixed capacity option to handle the peak needs in a more traditional manner. Now again, from the outside looking in, the software series implementations may look different, but from the inside software series, once established, it's all the standard OS 2200 releases, interfaces, and operations. So it'll look very familiar for any of our OS 2200 clients to operate the software series. And finally, again, this is an example of new technologies that we're bringing to market, and as part of our commitment to our OS 2200 clients, which hasn't changed. It shows that we're actively investing in the OS 2200 family and ways to expand your processing capabilities. So let's talk about the specific new capabilities that we have within the OS 2200 software series. There's 4 main products that we'll be talking about today. We have the ClearPath OS 2200 Gold solution. That's a production level of a mid-range OS 2200 processing on par with Dorado 4000 capabilities. We have the ClearPath OS 2200 Platinum solution, which again is production ready, but has a higher performance, higher capacity processing environment, more in sync with the Dorado 6000 or Dorado 860 class systems. We have a new release of the OS 2200 Developer Studio, and much like our SDK environments for Dorado, this is a development and test only licensing option, but it provides additional strengths and capabilities for added development of all OS 2200 pieces. Again, you can develop on the OS 2200 Developer Studio for the either Gold or Platinum instance or for a Dorado system. Finally, today we'll be talking about the OS 2200 Q Processor 5.0 release. It's not technically part of the 2.0 software series, but it is coming out at the same time. And this is a fully software delivered implementation of the Q processor. With the OS 2200 software series products, then you really have the freedom of choice in several different areas. You can choose your hardware platform infrastructure of your choosing. Again, specific servers that are as defined in your data center. You can change those technologies as change those resources as technologies or your specific OS 2200 requirements demand. You can choose your implementation framework. We'll talk about bare metal configurations and how those can address traditional storage and with a little less processing overhead. And we'll talk about how the OS 2200 software series products work within a VMware virtualized environment for new storage options and additional flexibility and deployment capabilities. And as I mentioned, we do have a couple different ways of licensing: a fixed capacity based on the number of OS 2200 logical instruction processors or IPs, as well as a pay-for-use model, which we call consumption, which will be very familiar to anyone who's been through the Dorado metering. A little bit here on the Q Processor 5.0. Again, this is a fully software-delivered Q Processor implementation that can then be run on its own server or as part of a VMware environment. It's compatible with all Q Processor implementations, including support for a Q Processor HA cluster and the failover. and management of the Q processor is in sync with the traditional and the existing Q processor releases. So it's a much similar interface to what your staff already understands. And really with the Q processor, it becomes part of our overall software series strategy, again, including such tools as the ePortal, Enterprise and Business, which is now also available in a software series, and other OS 2200 tools like EOM and AIS, for example. So I think you can see the benefits here from the OS 2200 software series implementation. Again, it supports your choice of a platform or a VMware resources. We certainly have done a lot to provide some information to you and to our sales and architect teams to help you with that installation. Can support growth as these new technologies emerge or as your requirements emerge. You want more memory for your OS 2200 environment, you're in charge of that. Just configure more memory as available through the infrastructure and then set that up through software series. Added flexibility when using the VMware solutions for dynamic resource allocation. And again, we're looking to partner with our clients to understand your specific requirements for new hypervisor, new public cloud deployments. So we're anxious to talk with any of our clients about where you think you're going as with the industry transitions to more cloud-based solutions. So let's go through some of the architectural concepts as well as some configuration information here. Now, as we've successfully implemented the firmware for our Intel-based Dorado family, our ClearPath servers, we've been able to take that firmware and then utilize it within a different design. The specialized firmware, again, as I mentioned, is hardened. We do a lot within the Dorado as well as now with software series to ensure that those security aspects that we talked about on the NIST chart are maintained for our clients and our reputation. We've developed specialty workloads like the Q processor and the ePortal that then fit into the overall firmware design of our Dorado systems. And if you look how that then changes, you can see that we can take that firmware and implement it within the OS 2200 software series. Now in PowerPoint, it looks pretty easy, but there's been a lot of hard work that our engineering teams have done to develop and to test these solutions so that they're fully able to be called a ClearPath level of capability. When you look at the overall design of a software series implementation, you see that we've combined the application processing and the I/O processing on a single set of software series firmware. And some of you may know that as SAIL. And that becomes the basis then for an OS 2200 instance. Now to complete the OS 2200 instance, you have to have an operations server. Again, management is similar to the Dorado family, as well as tape and disk resources in order to launch that instance. The OS 2200 Q processor is an optional piece, and each of these can then be run on either their own dedicated bare metal servers or as part of the VMware virtualized environment. Let's look first at OS 2200 software series on bare metal. Again, these are dedicated servers that are then required for both the OS 2200 host instance as well as a server for the operations server. They have to be separate in this case because the OS 2200 is a Linux derivative and the operations server runs on Windows. It works, has the advantage that bare metal does that it works with all supported Dorado I/O adapters and storage types. In fact, with a bare metal server running software series, you can unplug the storage from your Dorado system and plug it into a similar supported connection on the software series bare metal. It also supports a very cost-effective soft disk environment, which is an internal disk that then can be used for smaller OS 2200 software series instances, and it can be very cost-effective for development or smaller workloads. Now, in this environment, the client is responsible not only for providing the servers, but also for providing the network infrastructure, again, to connect up all the components of a bare metal environment. Storage options, again, plug compatible with your Dorado family, the fiber channel connections for various devices. We support the DSI VTL environment versus, via a fiber channel connection. We support EMC disk, and the EMC DLM is supported on the bare metal environment. Now, I mentioned the soft disk version of a server disk. Again, this is a disk environment that resides within a dedicated OS 2200 server. It appears as a Linux file structure from the server environment, but inside the OS 2200 software series, it has the same structures and can support all the file formats of OS 2200. You can build this disk using a RAID environment, so you get some additional resiliency there. But since it is internal to the bare metal server, it is disk access is limited to that OS 2200 server. But again, could be a very good solution for a developer studio implementation. Talking a little bit about VMware here, here's a sample VMware configuration. Now we're actually showing a couple VMware instances running on a common server or servers. Again, you have to be cognizant of the number of cores that are needed to support this, and this is really only an example. The nice thing about the VMware is you've immediately gained access to any of the VMware storage types that are supported by VMware. You can use a virtualized Ethernet connection to connect between the instances and other workloads running within your VMware infrastructure. And it's nice also in that in this environment, it's a common structure for both the OS 2200 software series as well as the operation server, because the VMware can handle the mix of Linux and Windows. We also have gone through and worked on some of the VMware specific provision and failover features. I'll talk about those in a second here. And as part of the delivery of software series, we provide the OVF formats, which align with the various capacity sets that we deliver. Some of the storage options, again, VMware supplies all the compatible storage options for this environment. So the OS 2200 software series will work with any VM supported storage. Now within the tape environments, we've also partnered with the DSI on a couple different solutions here. They have a DSI 520 family. These are physical appliances that are then connected through an Ethernet connection coming out of the VMware instance, as well as they have their own virtualized VTL, which is, again, runs in a virtual machine under VMware, provides a DSI compatible VTL environment for anyone that's running in the OS 2200 software series. And again, that's an iSCSI connection over a virtual NIC. Now with the VMware products, we have tested certain capabilities. We've tested the vSphere vMotion and storage vMotion. This allows workloads to be dynamically moved between the various ESX servers that are part of a VMware installation. can minimize downtime for maintenance on those devices. It also allows us to move and grow between the various components of an OS 2200 software series. In the vMotion and vSphere storage motion, vMotion, we can even support the OS 2200 without a system stop. Now, the vSphere High Availability and Site Recovery Manager are really more of a DR type solution. The vSphere High Availability is for within a single ESX complex, series of servers within the vCenter site that allows a cluster of servers to interact with each other. And if one of those servers goes down, it provides a failover capability, much like the high availability that's on the Dorado processing complex. Will result in a restart of the OS 2200 software series. But again, this is a DR instance that hopefully is not going to be a common event within VMware. VMware disaster recovery using VMware Site Manager has also been tested. And again, this is similar to the HA capability, and it's for moving the OS 2200 instance in a disaster between various VMware installations. So it's for remote failover from one VMware center to the next. Now I'm showing here a number of OS 2200 software series instances. Again, you can mix the size, you can mix the workload types within the OS 2200 software series deliverables. Each OS 2200 software series acts as an independent host to support that mix of development and production workloads. And you can actually have up to 10 OS 2200 host instances all working with a single operation server. However, we recommend that you have 2 operation servers installed, especially if you're in a bare metal environment. Show a chart here briefly to talk about the Q-processor HA cluster. Again, for either a VMware or a bare metal implementation with the Q-processor 5.0, we recommend a pair of Q-processor instances, active-passive Q-processor pairs, much as you have today with our other Q-processor implementations. And again, that then provides a higher level of failover capability through the HA cluster software that has already been tested and works on the Dorado family and with many of our clients as part of their ongoing processing. I'm going to talk now a little bit on our licensing models just to give you a feel for the capacities that are available for the OS 2200 software series platforms. Again, with the whole concept that the client gets to choose the underlying hardware infrastructure, we really couldn't do a licensing model based on performance, based on the standards that we'd used with our Dorado family, such as MIPS. So the software series is licensed on capacity. I always think of performance as capacity over time. If you think of the MIPS as million instructions per second. Well, with software series, we're taking out that time element and just really looking at the capacity of your workloads to be processed. So with software series, we're going to give you the capacity you need to process your OS 2200 workloads, but you'll be in charge of the actual deployment and determine the overall processing speed. With software series, we have a fixed capacity license, again, based on the number of OS 2200 instruction processors that will be licensed. It's more of a traditional model following the Dorado 4480s, for example. We also have a pay-for-use model, which is called consumption. And like the Dorado family, it measures IP seconds every month, gathers that information and reports it back to be decremented from a standard contract where you've already predetermined your overall processing needs. Now, a little bit different with consumption is we're using a new terminology called CVU, Cloud Value Units, which replace MIPS as the reporting metric. Again, trying to gain insight as to a different way of measuring the workload. But as part of our licensing options, you can actually change the hardware infrastructure without relicensing. We've got some new technology built into the consumption model that will maintain a consistent reporting metric as you change that infrastructure. So with the OS 2200 software series, you're in charge of how much of a processing you can get out and response time you can realize through this choice of hardware. For the various products within the software series 2.0 release, again, we have the OS 2200 Platinum capacity sets, as we call them. It's a fixed capacity. Licenses are available for from 6 to 11 IPs. So you can license those specific IP levels, or you can use a consumption model where you're measured on your usage and the ceiling for the Platinum environment is an 11 IP ceiling. For the Gold capacity set, a little bit smaller capacity, we start off with a fractional IP actually. You can run from a quarter through a full IP and then increments of 1 through 5 IPs in the OS 2200 Gold fixed capacity licenses. Again, trying to parallel some of our Dorado 4000 levels that we've had in the past. Similarly, we have a consumption model which is has a 5 IP ceiling. Again, pay for use based on the IP utilization over a reporting period. And with the Developer Studio, we've implemented new fixed capacity and consumption models as well. Again, Developer Studio is for development only, where Gold and Platinum are production levels of OS 2200 processing. With the Developer Studio, you can get a fixed capacity similar to the entry levels of the OS 2200 Gold. Lines up with the offerings we've had on our SDK for Dorados, or you can have a consumption pay for use with a fixed ceiling of 1 IP. Now, within consumption, again, we're measuring the IP seconds to determine how much work has been processed. But the Intel processor that you select has a distinct determination of the workload's measurement, of how many IP seconds we'll actually measure. So with the OS 2200 software series consumption, we've implemented a new technology called the calibrator. It's designed to normalize the CVU usage in any execution environment. And you'll see on your monthly statement with consumption that there'll be a calibration ratio that then is reported as part of the monthly statement and as part of your overall reports when it comes back. And that's all designed to adapt to changes in the bare metal or VMware instance deployment. Now, consumption emails and reports will be coming, as I said, as much like metering. Again, those are all of a very familiar format for our metering clients that move to OS 2200 software series. Licensing for software series, again, fixed capacity licenses built on the percentage or number of OS 2200 logical IBs. We do have short-term capacity increases via our COD program, much as we've had for Dorado. Consumption, again, is available much like a metering, where the actual number of IP utilization is counted every month, and there is even a pooling mechanism similar to we have with metering. So for multiple instances, OS 2200 software series instances, you can set up a CVU pool for your workloads. Now the software series is available through the Unisys Download Center. We're using a digital delivery process for Gold Platinum Developer Studio to provide the firmware, the OVFs, the key structures that are needed in order to implement those fixed capacity or consumption workloads. Similarly, for the Q processor, also available through the Unisys Download Center in our digital delivery process. Many of you have already been through the digital delivery process with the CP18 release. So you'll now be able to do a similar capability with OS 2200 software series. Now, we've tried to make the OS 2200 software series as easy as it could be for clients to do on their own. But for the first time through, you may find that you'd be looking for some services, for some consulting in implementing software series. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Forrest Crocker, who will take you through some of those services.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Good morning, everyone. I'm Forrest Crocker, pre-sales architect in the ClearPath Services Group, and I'll address the services associated with this product launch. Let's see here. There we go. Okay. You've seen previously a version of this graphic in what Chuck and Bob presented, but I'd like to say a little bit more about it. What you're seeing in this graphic is some new emphasis and rebalancing of the three main components of our comprehensive ClearPath services portfolio. Rebalancing means that even though in the past we've had offerings in all three areas, based on what we're hearing now from clients across the board, there are new business drivers which are looming larger than they may have in the past and which are placing a premium on addressing the challenges that come along with those. For example, we're hearing what we sometimes call key person risk, referring to one or more client staff nearing retirement, along with increasing pressure to open up the ClearPath systems of record, both as a data source and a data requester interacting with an increasing number of external systems, along with the need for more operations automation, along with the need to document client application assets, such as business rules and logic, along with interest in DevOps, and even extending to an expressed desire to retire all client-owned data center facilities over, for example, the next 5 to 7 years. So we've responded by extensively refreshing content and building out our portfolio in the broad areas you see here. So when you see these three equal and interlocking circles, that's exactly the message we want to convey. They're all equally important. Before moving on to the services specific to software series, I offer a suggestion that you explore either on the Unisys website or with your sales rep to see what's new and of interest along these lines that you may not have even been aware of and may not have even existed, say, 2 or 3 years ago. All right, let's see here. All right, here's a summary list of the services defined specifically for the 2.0 software series release. The ones you see designated as implementation are very much along the lines of what you're used to for a traditional tech refresh, for example, a Dorado system or a Q processor appliance. The next few slides show more detail about those, but the ones that really set this release apart and the ones I'd like to focus in on and zoom in on are the VMware pre-implementation consulting service and the data migration service. Okay, so first let's take a look at the VMware pre-implementation consulting service. From the outset of our software series program, even going back to the 1.0 Developer Studio release, the OS 2200 engineering team has been guided by an architectural principle that the product could be client installable whether deployed on bare metal or VMware. And all the product documentation that Bob referred to earlier does reflect that. At the same time, as I would guess most of you are very aware, a VMware vSphere private cloud itself offers a great and at times intimidating array of configuration choices in multiple dimensions. What this means is that along with all that fantastic flexibility and choice, you can be exposed to unanticipated consequences and side effects of those choices when you introduce new systems such as software series into existing vSphere environments. We find that most clients today have experience, sometimes at the highest expert level, operating a vSphere environment using either their own staff or a third-party cloud, a private cloud provider. As part of that, they will have developed a specific reference architecture governing such things as number of network connections per virtual machine, number of cores and amount of memory and storage per virtual machine, and many others, and will have established policies based on those reference architectures with respect to VMware vSphere products, such as Bob referred to earlier, DRS, SRM, HA, vMotion, storage vMotion, all of which, as Bob said, the OS 2200 engineering team has validated to work in a generic sense, but which may encounter speed bumps if the Unisys software series reference architecture and the client's internal reference architecture don't precisely align at each and every point. Having said that then, the main goals of this VMware pre-implementation consulting service are twofold. Number one, to identify and resolve any mismatches in those areas before implementation. And number two, and this is equally if not more important, to ensure that all internal client stakeholders, and especially those who may not previously been exposed to ClearPath, are all on the same page before step one of an actual deployment. So those then are the main benefits and target outcomes of this service. So I'm going to skip a slide here and go to the second one I wanted to zoom in on, and that's the data migration service. And I'm skipping this because I anticipate it may generate more questions than the pure implementation services. Of the 4 software series deployment use cases that Bob referred to earlier, the bare metal Intel-based server using existing Dorado supported virtual tape and disk devices is the simplest from a data migration perspective, in that it uses the very same approach that a traditional Dorado tech refresh would, either using all existing disk and virtual tape storage as is, or if the disk storage itself is being refreshed at the same time, leveraging that the new target system has simultaneous access to both old and new storage, so that all that's needed are transparent background disk-to-disk copies while the new system is already fully operational. For the remaining 3 software series options, in other words, the bare metal Intel-based server using internal storage, or VMware using the DSI VTL appliance along with VMware disk storage, or the 100% totally virtual VMware system using the DSI Restore software-based VTL and VMware disk storage, the traditional methods that minimize an outage window aren't available. The reason is that the source systems and the target system's data formats aren't the same. So the target system data must be reformatted. Obviously, our future aspiration is transparent live data migration. We're not there yet, but the engineering team is actively investigating improvements, not only now, but also because we know that this becomes certainly no less important as we look at future possibilities for ClearPath software series deployments in a public cloud. For now, that is for this release. In situations where minimization of the handoff time from the predecessor system to the new software series system is at a premium, we really suggest you consider the service. Okay, Bob, unless there are specific questions on the pure implementation services I skipped over, I think I'll stop here and turn it back over to you.
Okay, Forrest, thank you very much. Yes, there are a number of services that we will be offering with the software series, and we can talk to those clients that have a direct interest in those individually. So I will move on here and talk about some final topics, specific elements that are needed in order to implement the software series. Okay, thanks again, Forrest. All right, when you start looking at the elements of setting up a bare metal host or a virtualized environment under VMware, there are a number of specific items that need to be accounted for the OS 2200 software. You need to assign a number of Intel processor cores, specifically for each of the IPs that are licensed within the software series implementation. And you'll find that there will be additional cores that are needed to run the firmware. And as we go through this list, that'll be the fairly constant thing with these topics, is that there will be specific capacities that are needed for OS 2200 processing, as well as what the firmware itself will be utilizing. So much like the Intel processor cores, you can set up an amount of memory that will be required for the OS 2200. You can actually control that all the way up to 16 gigawords just by the implementation that you've defined for the software series. And additional memory, of course, will be needed for the firmware itself. Storage requirements, whether internal or external, again, you've got to account for the client application, what you need from a traditional OS 2200 environment, and there is some additional storage required for the firmware and for the specific, actually, overlays of the memory. You need some storage reserve there as well. From network connections, again, as part of your the client networks, you need to have whatever you need for your OS 2200 processing, and we recommend a separate network connection to connect between the OS 2200 instance and the operations server. And all of this is really defined within our OS 2200 software series documentation. One of the documents, called the Compatibity Guide, will help you guide you through the selection and knowing exactly how these OS 2200 instances need to be defined. From a software level perspective, again, the operations server requires a Windows 2016 license. That's now part of a client-supplied deliverable. We don't ship an operations server, so we can't ship along Windows to go with it. The OS 2200 software series works with release 18.0, which is available through the Download Center, as we discussed. If you're doing a Q processor implementation, you will have to have the latest version of the MQ series for ClearPath OS 2200 9.0, as well as CIFS 9R1. And with the VMware implementations, Again, that's a client-supplied infrastructure and software. Unisys has tested the following levels of ESXi 6.0 and 6.5. Those are all supported with the software series. Again, that's a lot of information that we've given you here today. You will find that as of today, there's a lot of good detail available on unisys.com. OS 2200 software series is part of the OS 2200 software string inside unisys.com, but there you'll find specific pages for the Gold, Platinum, and Developer Studio products, each with their own product information sheets. You'll find additional brochures and white papers for security and other information. A large part of the documentation is also now available on the Unisys support site. These are the specific implementation guides, the compatibility guide, and a very important VMware best practices guide. Again, if you're working within a VMware environment, we've taken what we've learned and put it into a set of best practices and documented in that specific manual. For Q processor, there's a whole different set of information, a planning, installation, and configuration guide, as well as the 9.0 operation for the WebSphere MQ software on OS 2200. So we've really gone through a lot of detail here today. Again, we feel that the OS 2200 software series is really provides a new level of choice and a new level of environment for our OS 2200 clients. Allows you to align your ClearPath infrastructure with the rest of your data center, provides new levels of flexibility within the VMware vSphere tools, and all the time maintaining compatibility with our existing OS 2200 processes. Again, code compatibility, system interfaces, standard operation, the things that you know and rely on for your business processes. So with that, I thank you, and we can take some questions here now, Matt.
Excellent. Thank you, Bob. That does bring us to the Q&A portion of the presentation. Again, if you have questions for our presenters, you can send those using the question box on the lower right-hand side of the menu toolbar. We'll just get started with some that have come across. I know that we are running just a little bit short on time here, but we'll try to take as many as we can. If we don't get to your questions live, we will follow up with you after the event is concluded. So the first question that I have for you guys is, will Dorado systems continue to be available?
Yeah. Chuck, do you want to take that one?
Yes, I'll take that one, Bob. Yes, as I indicated at the outcome and as Bob reinforced, this is about choice. The software series Gold and Platinum Developer Studios complement our existing Dorado product line. The Dorado family that's in our portfolio today of Dorado 4400, 6400, and 8400, depending on your performance and capacity needs, are available, continue to be available through this year, 2019. As we transition to 2020, we are planning to bring new products, the successors to those, the 4565, 8500 products we anticipate bringing to market, in particular on the 8500 family, adding significant increases in performance and capacity. Those will be available to succeed the 4000, 6000, 8000 products of today and to complement software series. So this is about choice, not replacing what you have.
Excellent. Next question I have is, are services mandatory?
No. Again, as we talked about, the services are an optional piece. We've designed and taken a lot of effort to put into a documentation to make sure that a client could, if they wanted to implement software series on their own services with their own efforts. However, again, this for first time and it's part of a VMware implementation, some of our services are highly recommended. But there's a lot of good documentation you can read to kind of understand exactly what's needed for implementing software series.
All right, thank you. Next question that we have is, can we use OS 2200 Developer Studio to develop for Dorado-based applications?
And I'll answer that. Yes, absolutely. The OS 2200 Developer Studio is a full development environment for both existing Dorado platforms as well as any of the new software series capacity sets, the gold and platinum capacity sets. So it's all the same OS 2200. You can develop it once and implement it on either infrastructure.
Excellent. Thank you, Bob. And then I believe this is going to be the last question that we do have time for today, and that is, does BIS run with OS 2200 software series?
Again, yes. All of the OS 2200 software series products currently supported with the Dorado family will then be available within the OS 2200 Gold and Platinum environment and the tools available with the Developer Studio. So it is a full OS 2200 capability that should support any of our third-party as well as client-developed applications within OS 2200.
Thank you, Bob. That does bring us to the conclusion of the event here. I just wanted to give you a minute or two here for any closing statements that you do have for the audience.
I think that we've said quite a bit here. Again, it's a conversation that we want to continue with our clients. This is all about choice and flexibility and working within the standards that our clients have had. Again, we will continue with our traditional integrated stack, hardware and software integrated stack on the Dorado platforms, but this is a new level of choice that's now an option for many of our clients within the OS 2200 software series.
Great. Thanks again, Bob and Chuck and Forrest for another wonderful presentation. That does conclude today's event. Again, the recorded version of today's webinar will be made available for download on the Unisys website and also on the Unisys ClearPath YouTube channel. I would like to thank you all for attending and have a great day.